Greetings, Modernism in the Museum students. I wish you a happy Friday from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I returned a couple days ago from my week in Nebraska, giving lectures on modern art, theology, faith, and philosophy. I'll be leaving next week, middle of next week, for a week in Los Angeles. I'll be working on an exhibition of the paintings of Enrique Martinez Celaya that I'm curating for the museum at the University of California at Santa Barbara, which happens to be where Enrique graduated with an MFA in the early 90s. So it's interesting thinking about the subject of this class, the art museum, and particularly the subject of the last 2 weeks, academic art history and the art museum, and how they relate, their differences, as I work as an art historian and classroom teacher, and also curating an exhibition of paintings drawn from the 1990s. So this idea of contextualization, recontextualization, decontextualizing the paintings, taking them from their, reactivating them, putting them in a different context from which they were intended or they were made, and then trying in some ways to return them back to a context. My argument that I'm making, the curatorial scholarship, you could say, that I'm developing, is related to recontextualizing, rehistorically contextualizing these works, and reconsidering their work, reconsidering them during the decade of the 1990s when they were made. So I'll be in and out. I'm hoping to get done the discussion prompts for week 3 this weekend. I'm sorry that it's taken me a little longer. I like to have them done at the beginning of the week, but my travel schedule has prevented me from doing that. And then next week I will have your week 4 discussion prompt responses done by the early in the week, because then I'll be leaving town and spending a week in Los Angeles. So I'll keep you up to date on that. And if you have any questions regarding your midterm, or as we'll begin to get into moving to the direction of a final paper, please write, and I'll respond as quickly as I possibly can. A couple things I want to talk about in this video notes edition is how we've regarded the art museum and academic art history as two very different ways of presenting art and of studying art. And often we may not spend enough time showing how they blend and the kind of hybrid identity. Just my own identity as a trained art historian, trained as an academic art historian who writes academic art history, but also has had a significant career as a curator, working in museums, developing museum exhibitions, has made me very sensitive to this hybrid notion of the academic curator. And certainly most curators are trained as academic art historians, have doctorates in the history of art, do publishing, publish in juried articles, scholarly articles, write for experts in the field. But they take their work, and this is where I'm interested in this relationship, they take the insights of the experts and the scholars, and they try to figure out ways that they can craft exhibitions of the artifacts that can communicate on a more popular level, or a more diverse, or to address more diverse audiences with those insights. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the history that is being produced in an art museum is a different kind of history that is being produced by academic art historical scholarship. However, it is important to keep in mind that academic art historians are writing for their peers, their scholarly peers. They're not making any pretenses to speaking beyond that, nor should they. Scientists are not making work for those of us who don't know anything about science. Scientists are busy doing their work, working within a community, a scientific community, to further the knowledge of science, just like art historians. What is interesting about the popularization can take place when those art historians are not just teaching their doctoral students and their graduate students, but when they step inside an introductory classroom and they teach introductory classes. Or you could say that the insights of academic art history find themselves popularized in the textbooks that are used for undergraduate curriculum. And the curator, who's working as a specialist in a particular artist's work or in a particular art historical focus, finds ways to bring that knowledge to bear in broader audience constituencies. Moreover, one of the things that you could say is a significant difference, a methodological or epistemological difference with the art museum and the academic art historian, is because the academic art historian is not tied to the presentation of artifacts. That also means that the art historian isn't necessarily tied to object-oriented art history, in which the beginning and the ending is in deepening our understanding of that particular work of art, nor is it attached to the singular identity of the artist. And so what academic art historians, untethered by this structure, will criticize art museum scholarships for doing is mystifying and providing excessive romanticized attention on the work of art as a masterpiece and the artist as a singular genius working in isolation, or a hero that triumphs over the historical epoch. And that can often be the tendency in museums, because you will tend to focus on the singular individual as a creative genius, or as an extraordinary figure of creative work that then produces this unified body of work. What is often more difficult to communicate, although it does happen, is the collaborative focus of artistic practice, the influence of artists, the interconnections, the close relationships that artists have that shape their work with other artists. And so exhibitions that pair the work, say, of Picasso and Matisse are ways of giving credence, or Picasso and Braque are ways of giving credence to a kind of collaborative identity. But what is often lost in art museum exhibitions is that messy texture, the social, economic, political, and historical texture out of which that artist becomes who they are, and the work emerges from that artistic agency. So the criticism for art museums is that the curator can give too much credence to the singular, extraordinary genius of the artist as a creative agent, and too much attention to the masterpiece identity of this particular work of art or that particular work of art that just so happens to be in that museum collection or that collector's collection. And certainly the art museum's criticism of the academic art historian is that it doesn't focus enough on the particular works of art, that it moves in all kinds of other directions, focusing on social and cultural and economic circumstances that just treat the work of art as just another piece of historical evidence, as another relic of the past that helps us understand the past. And yet for the art museum curator, the focus is how we experience the work of art today. That even a work of art made in 1895 is contemporary when a viewer sees it and experiences it today in the context of this period, amidst all of the social, economic, cultural, and political processes that have shaped that viewer's understanding of what art is and how art functions. And so what is interesting about the art museum, the interesting challenge that the art museum offers, is the challenge of trying to respect the historical origins of the work and yet enact and help steward understanding of the fact that the work of art continues to open up horizons of experience as it moves away from its historical context. That the historical context and the framework within which it was made and in response to which it was made continues to live and unfold and reveal meaning and generate experiences as it moves away from that historical context. And so the most interesting work that is taking place in art history and in art museum curatorial scholarship is exhibitions and curatorial scholarship and academic art history that is shaped by this hybrid notion, this idea of the recognition of the insights that the art museum exhibition demonstrates and the challenges that it faces, and then trying to find ways that those excesses and challenges that each discipline faces can be mitigated by the other approach, that the art museum curatorial scholarship can continue to focus attention upon the very fact that the academic art historian who's interested in this artist's work or that work of art or that art historical period is influenced by precisely the exhibitions that they saw, the exhibitions that they contribute essays to. And so this aspect of interchange and interaction and communication is crucial. As we see in what I'm hoping that you've kept up with this parallel notion of Alfred Barr and what Barr is doing at the Museum of Modern Art, in many ways producing a kind of art history that influenced academic art historians for 2 generations, was being crafted and honed and presented in the Museum of Modern Art through exhibitions and the publications that were produced that accompanied those exhibitions. And next week, we'll look at Alfred Barr and the Museum of Modern Art specifically and how it generated narratives art historical narratives as well as experiences, and the crucial role that the Museum of Modern Art and Barr played in developing how we understand art historical scholarship in the United States, how we understand the historical scholarship of modern art, and the role of the Modern Art Museum. An author that I've asked you to read a few articles of, book reviews and other texts, is Ivan Gaskell. Gaskell is a friend of mine who currently has a teaching position as in material culture at Bard in New York City. He participates in their graduate program, the Graduate Curatorial Studies program, and he also serves as the director of their gallery. And he curates exhibitions that he uses in his seminars and his classes. And so the exhibition itself serves his academic art history and his work as a scholar and as a teacher. And in fact, my own work, when I was curator of the Sheldon Museum of Art, I taught as an adjunct in the art history department. And one of the classes that I taught was a course on 20th century art 19th and 20th century art that I taught exclusively from the collections at the Sheldon. And so what I did was I curated exhibitions at the Sheldon that coincided with the semester I was teaching the course, and with an eye to those exhibitions serving as the classroom, the literal classroom within which I taught the class. And so I taught from those exhibitions. I taught from those artifacts. I taught from the relationships that I generated in that exhibition. So amongst the various audiences that I had in mind, one of the audiences that I had in mind were the 20 students the 20 undergraduates that were enrolled in the class. And instead of meeting in a lecture room where we saw slides and reproductions of the work, we met in the exhibition space and worked through those artifacts, which provided a very different art historical perspective for the students who were used to going to lecture halls and looking at screens. And so it also provided an opportunity for me to talk about the scholarship of curatorial work, and how curatorial work can serve and deepen art historical scholarship and art historical pedagogy. What does it mean to teach from objects? And for many of you who are classroom teachers, that becomes a challenge. Or how do you integrate art into your history classroom or your philosophy classroom? How do you bring it to bear? And in many ways, what you're doing is you are curating that work. You're setting it, you're juxtaposing it next to ideas, you're putting it next to other works, you're putting it next to other concepts, and you're putting it in conversation. What the art museum curator does is put artifacts in conversation with each other to create something in between that the viewer experiences. So I hope these thoughts are helpful to you. Again, I apologize for being a little bit late with my discussion prompt responses. I will get back to you beginning today, Friday, and through the weekend. And I'm looking forward to reading your discussion prompt responses for 4, and next week introducing and focusing next week's attention on Alfred Barr and the Museum of Modern Art. And I hope you've enjoyed reading Sybil Cantor. We'll talk about her in the videos for next week. And have a great weekend. I can't believe we're getting close to the end of this class. These 8 weeks are just simply not enough. And what you and I need to do is we need to go to museums together, don't we? I think that's an important component of this class that's missing. And I would love very much to do that with you. Have a great weekend. Take care.